Hello everyone. I would like to talk about today the contexts of chaos. So when we look at contexts of chaos, we are simply asking the question, where can man's experience lead when he acknowledges beyond his organized and ordered routine and ways of thinking? So how can you acknowledge existence very irrationally, actually? Is it possible, or are you only made of rationality? Is rationality the only thing keeping your reality firm? Or is there an unknown element to your life which is simply the next happening? We want to look at life in a way where we're observing human life. You are immediately an observer of a human being, and that human being is you. So you will simply see that you have immediately learned from your living this whole time. So you have that sense of knowing even though you might not consciously be able to linearize it. Now we have something called, or we have termed, the subconscious mind or the greater unconscious mind. And pretty much the way I would like to simplify that is that what we know, we consider what we're conscious of. What we don't know, we consider we're unconscious of. Now, we are saying, based on that relationship, when we look at lives and how the order of this universe has sprouted from chaos, especially how, and many Greek gods agree, but there is a sense of recognizing that the way we are thinking about thinking is actually wasting our time, and it's not efficient. I've noticed that certain modalities of thought I jump to based on my conditioning are not that helpful to what I want to achieve. So what is helpful? Well, when you're in a messy room, before you even think of moving the mess, how much space do you see? Before you get yourself out of your problem, how much possibility for hope do you see? Possibility for advancement do you see? You know, I have learned that the biggest problem of my life was that I did not seek greatness, because I had shaped it and put it aside. Greatness is actually you being very efficient in how you are being alive. And so this efficiency is actually an existential sensitivity to how you are present in reality. And so when you acknowledge this, when you go through this realm of self-observance, you will see that you are not just acknowledging your body in different ways where you have, let's say, an exterior sense or an out-of-body sense, but an out-of-reality sense as well, where everything that even is keeping or defining a body is also shifting as well. So what that means is that this whole time we've been thinking we have to evolve individually when we suddenly see greater collective forms are transcending as well. So what that means is similar to how we are moving up the staircase of existence. Similarly, we can also see that the universe and all forms of consideration are also moving that way as well. You see, I've noticed in these Krishna consciousness movements, the way they acknowledge their immediate symbol is the Godhead, and so is the personality. So they're learning from ways of being before them, which have been associated very closely to God. Now, when a man is trying to learn ways of being, he cannot ignore the circumstances and the conditions of his present in his thinking. What that means is that you can think about, whatever you like, but if you're right in front of, let's say, traffic or somewhere where there's noise, you cannot ignore that noise. There is a point where you are not tuning into it, but you cannot ignore it in the sense that reality and natural expression constantly fluctuates and changes itself. So sometimes when I walk, I notice aspects of my being alive, aspects of myself are in a sense suddenly being taken away. Suddenly, it's as if life is transitioning you and preparing you into a greater moment of awareness. And so it is because you are aware of your existential momentum. And this existential momentum is not an idea, it is an unspeakable experience of what is within you, which is everything. So when you find Mr. Within, a profound moment occurs where you begin to see that your eyes don't just belong to your idea, and that you are a greater view of how everything is transcending any idea of itself it has. So if you are taking a sense of transcendence to the idea of you, you can see that anything you conceive as an idea also has that ability. So in a sense, our limitation is kept there by the co-creation that chooses to see a condition. So we must simply ask, what was the preference of humanity to, for example, litter? And you see, it's an existential natural preference of the decisions of other men. So what that means is that if we really trusted our past, we would not see a problem now. We would only see advancement, and we would constantly keep advancing. However, advancement can imply different things when your self-awareness shifts and alters. So to explain states of being based on my views and my experience, to explain ideology, the relationship is one where they both affect one another. And so they do affect one another, but there's also other factors. So in other words, you first think that there's only two players in the game. Then you see that those two players are part of another player in another two-player game. And so reality has a very branch-like manner of presenting itself once a mind is allowing a table of great consideration and allowance of consideration. What that means is that many of us are simply sticking to the ideology that, oh, I'm thinking, so I need to think my own ideas, and if there's anything that's not from me, it's not true. What that means is that you are saying that the only way you trust ideas is based on how you are acknowledging your idea of self, of who you are. So what that means is that when you think about yourself, there are limitations. But when you blend the dynamic of thought and the stillness of body as one progresses through reality, there is a very intense appreciation for who you are, because who you are is moving your world. And so we might find Thor's hammer falling down from the clouds, and not agents finding it, but when man looks at his creation, he sees that there are greater hammers. And you see how the engagement of one reality of abstraction with one reality that does not consider abstraction that much can change the reality. What that means is that many people are not considering the potential of the change. And so you need to know the potential of the change as you are observing something. And so that knowing is transparent. So in other words, science is missing a transparent observance of that which is kept to be even formed. And so that transparent observance is very important. Now, the context of chaos simply suggests that many of us look for truth grounded in conceptualization. What that means is that we're looking for concepts to have an expansion or a sense of expanding both our ideas and ourselves, you know? In other words, knowledge. And so the man has had this natural impulse in seeking knowledge. But after seeing that the external knowledge is as temporal as his body, the only knowledge was his self-awareness, which in a sense was what was holding his reality. So sometimes the treasures you think are treasures are only treasures if you have not looked around. You must be self-aware, and so allow a sense of omnipresence to be. What that means is that a lot of people think creation is only through entrances. No. Sometimes you exit and there's a new understanding of creation. And so how ridiculous it would be if you're only going through entrances and you think that they're not exits, when they are. So what that means is that immediately when you're thrown into a reality where your attention is kept there, if you have the existential self-awareness that your attention cannot be kept in that way because you know yourself of another sense of intelligence and being, that self-awareness will, in a sense, always be emanating clarity. And that is what we want. We want you throughout the day not being someone who is thinking of, in a sense, ruining his physical mechanism. You want to work with the flows of life, and so then you explore greater dynamic bodies. What that means is that this physical presence that we have is simply a static body. It is simply the essence of water, the essence of being in solid form. So now, we are now being suggested by Mr.Within that there are liquid aspects of your body which you can experience, but they are not physical bodies. They are collective acknowledgements of your experience where there's not an individual direct relationship shaping everything. So what that means is that when you acknowledge yourself as more your looser bodies than this body, you're comfortable in physical life. But if you only acknowledge yourself in physical life or only still in the physical sense of your body, you are required to acknowledge greater flows of how you are involved in life and how life is involved with you. The next beings are great involvements in life, great communications, great existential communications. What that means is that we want to see eternity no longer in the dictionary named, but something that is present in man's direct experience the minute he wakes up from the dreams that he creates. There is a profound element to how all your elements and fundamental thoughts of reality are kept. You want to ask a question of what is truth when you are in the clarity before or even beyond idea. Because we don't want to break things that were never there. That is just your attention and your physical relationship not being utilized to its complete potential. What that means is that we want to see that forget about making money, guys. Just inspire the human beings around you, because what you want is that people being more able. What that means is I don't want to be surrounded with people who are less able than me. I want people to be greatly able than me and to have an understanding that that ability is a compassionate existential movement. So what that means is that you might think that rich millionaire is not allowing some people some things, but trust me, the forces of reality and how they place an individual where he must be placed are not judging him, but are always realigning him based on his actions. So what that means is that existence is a mirror that is co-created through different intentions of simultaneous presence. In other words, do not seek shape when your direct experience will present you in a sense of being beyond any personality. And so the context of chaos will be simply understood. Because you are no longer lost in a concept. You are becoming the clarity of your immediate command to know yourself. Your immediate, in a sense, self-awareness, self-initiation, self-knowing into who you are. You want to be a being who wants to utilize your life with ability. And ability means do not try to change things externally, but internally recognize how the design of your eyes is significant. Because, as I have said, within the mind of man, there are many treasures, but within the heart of man, there are also many treasures. And so you must begin utilizing your human body with a self-awareness of greater senses of your own being. And that is a requirement, because then you will open the valves and the channels of inspiration. So sometimes you're not just given, let's say, words or ideas or dreams or something in regards to how certain energies want to communicate with you, or in a sense remind you of the greater design you're of. You see that it is man's individuality which is keeping him individual. And so if man originates his knowing from his individuality and does not remember his knowing from his collectivity, then he will feel he is lost when he's always embraced by the greater knowing of everything his conception would dissolve in. Man is present, and so the context of chaos become relevant as they become bridges to a sense of freedom where idea is no longer around you. Idea is no longer able to communicate with you in the same way because you are becoming that space, that state of being, that moment where conception is it hasn't even began. You're simply the observer, and you are the painter's gaze at his brush. And so the brush can move and fluctuate, but again, there's greater things that one can do. So greater existential understanding tries to, in a sense, burst you into greater context of chaos, which from that greater context of chaos, you are a conception of many orders. And so that is how we are recognizing it. Because the way man's consciousness is now fluctuating, that method, that manner is simply keeping him in the way he is. The study of isness is the most important study of humanity. Because how else would you know what there is? And so, with a very compassionate and gracious blessing, I want to tell you that there is no need to be overwhelmed by reality. Because once you see yourself, your presence is overwhelming beyond anything that can look at it. So what that means is that in your emptiness, newfound ways of collective being will be presented to then be your inspiration for your navigation in this individual sense of reality. We are exploring our eyes, and in that great exploration, recognizing grander vision. And so once the concept is no longer keeping you, you are the context that is there, regardless of whatever has been said or not, or done or not, or seen or not. It is a playfulness of consciousness with the design of its life to see the many ways it is present and living. Let yourself be guided by your sense of beauty. And this sense of beauty is not something to, in a sense, play around or think it's a joke. It actually means look around and see what's beautiful to you. Because when you look at your truth, you're seeking a beautiful truth, a truth that is meaningful in many ways, not one that is just satisfying a physical urge to say I'm physical. You know, it's very interesting because in the way man is present, in his multidimensionality, each aspect, each plane of existence which he is within begins to then have an urge to keep reality where it was conceived. And think of it as simply as people don't want to get out of their comfort zone unless they see that they were never comfortable in it. So similarly, planes of existence have an urge to be there unless an aspect of them, in a sense, transcends beyond their limited form. So what that means is that many people think that your beings are just incarnating into people. Not really, actually. There are certain beings who just come and become experience. They become pillars of experience because their consciousness is inspired by a greater collective vision. And what that means is that similar to how the whirling dervishes had one member of them named the Khalifa looking after him, being the greater vision and the greater blessing of that movement, similarly, you will see that there is no greater movement than the self-awareness and the transition into consciousness as being the origin of all that is through a hollow, self-reflective, and non-linear presence. We want to discover more than what we are. We want to see if we made a decision right now of reaching and taking ourselves to the highest peak of our experience, could we do that? And you know what? Yes, you can. Because it is not something that just can be done, it has been done the minute you're in the proximity. The minute you're in the range of awareness to the greater design, the greater pattern, you get it. Similar to how when you're making a puzzle, suddenly you see it and you suddenly put all the pieces in order. Your mind has an ability to extract greater senses of being from this reality and dimension of existence, and how we go on to acknowledging it into methods of hierarchy so we can navigate. The pilot knows that he is separating and creating a spectrum simply to create new exciting moments of navigation, but at the same time in an instant never needs. So the pilot, the way he ejects is immediately never having ever been there. So the way you act as a being, the pilot of consciousness, dissolves into a moment of emptiness where the being is no longer relevant to this reality. So what that means is that your body is relevant. Your hunger, your food, and all the stuff is relevant to you, and it is what is actually keeping you in this certain density. However, you do not know the ability of self-awareness. Because once your self-awareness reaches beyond an acknowledgement of form, you can see that you can have a choice to immediately eject out of one reality to then be present in another. But it's not very professional. What that means is that you don't try to change the reality you're in. You internally know that you're always changing. So you will see that there are types of beings who go they become extreme athletes, and they go engage into very deep physical activity to then experience very deep moments that other men cannot simply do, for example, doing backflips on a motorcycle, let's say. Now, it's very important to see that your path, or the way your attention is designed, is by how you are choosing to see the platform of your flight. Man can sit down and in his silence and stillness become the movement of the cosmos. This is important for this age because I look at children who they know of this greater sense of multidimensionality and existential awareness. However, the way we are shaping our kids to be people who can communicate is a bit limiting. So what that means is that man has done a good job on creating language and culture, but the range, the energetic range, which is language creates when he uses that technology, is not efficient because it also limits him. So what that means is that language is that huge knife you gave to a child, So that child might suddenly be able to cut an apple, but then might at times cut itself. And so why do you give a dangerous technology to a being who already has freedom? So what that means is that when you look at a child, that child is being very sensitive into how he needs to act in this life. It's taking it in. That is the nature of novelty, in which the new is always trying to rediscover the old. Because that is what reality can simply be. Now, you need to really see that man can get caught in his own sight. You can choose to acknowledge things or value things in ways where those values become too heavy. And when you realize you have the potential of doing that, you wonder, have I been doing that? And so how can one break all the bars and prisons of their past? By observing the context of chaos and realizing that there's nothing to worry about a prison. What that means is that if they take you to prison, that you will see that you are, in a sense, in a room. So in other words, if I take you into your basement, how would you feel? If I take you to your, let's say, kitchen, how would you feel? It's a room. So your internal experience is untouched by life. But your external experience, if you pay attention to it too much to create an immediate value there, then you will see that everything can touch you. And then you'd get a bit bothered by your experience, and so you would again transition to a greater sense of where you feel you should go. When a being gets a multidimensional acknowledgement of reality, of the planes of experience, and just in a sense the concept of dimension, you will see that he works with a knowing that's as if it already knows. So when you as an individual person begin trusting your intuition and begin being present into flows of life where your creativity is maxed out, and you're just in a sense always coming up with the newest idea, which is always the greatest in your reality, because it's your newest idea, then you can navigate into any realm through the knowing that you know. So what you know can then transition into the manifestation that you feel will be your greater journey. And so as conceptualization no longer remains, the context of chaos will show you that even freedom is present beyond the concept. Much blessings and namaste.